I would like to put you on the spot, Magnus.
Oof, go ahead.
Can you name any of the other summer releases from summer 2005, which is the same, which is the same year that Batman Begins came out?
Oh, did Fantastic Four come out that year?
It did. You got one. Look at that.
I don't
This
know
is
why I remembered that.
this is our favorite one with Ian Garofalo and Chris Evans, and the definitely didn't like want to make them kiss a whole lot in the movie. They're electric when they're on screen together, Ian Garofalo and Chris Evans. But yes, that is one of the other movies.
Mm,
The reason that I asked this question, by the way, while you're thinking of other entries, unless you have one,
can't think of one off the top of my head. If anyone comes up, I'll mention it.
yeah. The reason I start off with this in context is that Batman Begins basically saved um, theater film going. That's a big statement to say, but it at least saved 2005 film going. The box office had been in a big slump for almost a year at this point. And it was in a long line of movies that was expected to quote unquote save the box office in the summer of 2005. So I'm going to list off a few of the other movies. And one of them is very important. One of them is one I really love. And the rest of them just kind of are movies I think about. So Star Wars Episode 3 also came out this summer, Revenge of the Sith.
Oh,
Madagascar, where we got the zebra polka dot meme from forever and ever ago. Uh, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, which was the Angelina Jolie and what's his name are married
Brad
but also
Pitt.
secretly, yeah, Brad Pitt. Um, War of the Worlds, which was the Tom Cruise remake, which was not as good as any of the other War of the Worlds, including the rock opera, which is amazing. Um, and then my personal favorite movie of the summer that year that I went to see like 3 times in theaters. I loved it so much. This was the Johnny Depp version of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Oh,
That was reportedly truer to the book and led to a musical happening. I think the musical is more inspired by this. And hot take: this version of Charlie is not better than the Gene Wilder version, but it's so different, it almost feels like a completely different experience. And I want to talk about it at some point. But so all of these movies were part of that 2005 year, and every single one of them was eclipsed by Batman Begins, regardless of how I feel about it, regardless of what we say in this episode. This movie didn't just revitalize Batman, quote unquote. It kind of saved the film industry, to be honest. It created a new sensation in like summer blockbusters. It created a whole bunch of new stars. There was media fervor surrounding it. Um, you can actually go down some of the side streets they filmed on. Like I know people at school that literally lived on streets that got blocked off, like in shots where the Bat Tumbler goes down the street, which is what they call the Batmobile in this, because it's not the Batmobile, it's the Tumbler, I guess. Um, but they don't call it that because of the website. They call it that because that was like the the military term for whatever the vehicle was Lucius Fox was letting Batman rent. But yeah, it's not actually a Batmobile, which I was interested to find out. Is that technically what he's going around is not a Batmobile, but it's called the Tumbler, which is very menacing sounding, I have to be honest.
mm. But then it probably fits in more of the realistic, gritty interpretation that they were going for here,
Yeah,
rather than
which is yeah,
because the Batmobile being sort of like a themed car sounds quite fun and such, is doesn't seem to match the essence of this film. Having a more sort of like the Tumbler really does.
yeah. The same goes for Batman's batsuit here, which was made more for flexibility. They do have that one weird moment in the film where like Alfred smashes the graphite. I always think about the smash of the kind of graphite um, that the things over his eyes. But like this
Mm.
particular shoot and the particular style of the bat the Bat Tumbler, I guess I'll call it, were really made to fit into this slightly more martial arts, definitely more gritty inner city, Gotham kind of falling down around its head. Um, Outside of the lineage of the problematic homophobia that plagued Batman and Robin, Batman Begins succeeds on its own terms, but there were just so many expectations and so much nervousness about it that you can't ignore that even though it's not part of the Shoemaker Burton Batman films, it's kind of haunted by the legacy, good and bad, of both of those things. I don't think
Yeah,
I don't think it could exist without them. I don't think this
no.
version of Batman would work if we hadn't had the colorful, acidic candy drop Gotham of Batman and Robin and Batman Forever.
It certainly wouldn't, or at least it wouldn't exist in this form. Um, Having done some reading up about this to refresh my memory beforehand, it was very studio politics and such, very much played a part in the creation of this film, um, due to how underperforming, Batman and Robin was. They cancelled a lot of the previous ones. They went on that apology trip that they did, and they wanted to do a much more realistic, down to earth, gritty version of The Dark Knight. And they went through a few different things. Oh, who was it that there was one person that submitted an idea for the film before they settled on the Nolan thing. I
Yeah.
forget who it was.
Was it the Aronofsky version, which was like
No,
closer to year one? No, okay. So
it
it was the
was.
biggest name was Joss Whedon. Joss Whedon's
Um,
2002 project was what
mm,
eventually would, I don't know if it would eventually become this, but Whedon's was the big, at the time, Whedon was still an unstoppable force. People hadn't really found out he was a monster yet. I think actually him being a monster came out of this conversation of like, should he be doing a Batman film? I can't remember the timeline for when we discovered what a nightmare Joss Whedon was, but
mm,
that
I think
partially led to him not getting Batman, whatever his Batman film was.
yes. Sorry, yes, it was Whedon. I remember before they gave it to Nolan and then Bale and such.
Yeah,
But yeah, this film, to put it in a nutshell, was very much a reactatory res- r- response to what Batman and Robin was. And I do agree with you that as a property and as an interpretation, Batman Begins does stand up on its own 2 feet and has a clear aesthetic and atmosphere of its own. But I do wonder whether it was also a response as well to the direction things were going in. Um, because at that point, gritty, more realistic interpretations of things were very much becoming in vogue. And that's when you start to see more people doing reboots and such, and more sort of gritty versions of things starting to come out. Although I think Batman Begins really helped to popularize that as well.
yeah. I so there's a few interesting things about this movie that I'm curious about, kind of as a film person, as a theater person, like something I'd like to talk to eventually to Christopher Nolan about when I'm famous enough to talk to Christopher Nolan. By the way, not my favorite Christopher Nolan film. I don't think people realize that Batman Begins and The Dark Knight have a movie sandwich between them. I really love The Prestige. I was actually kind of more blown away by The Prestige in some ways than I was The Dark Knight. But like, I remember Memento coming out. I got to see Following, which was so Batman Begins is really like Tim Burton early in Christopher Nolan's career. So that's kind of the first thing to think about is where this lives in Christopher Nolan's filmography. This is kind of early in his creation of a mythology of man versus monster, which we see like later in his work. Um, Something interesting about Batman Begins specifically, and why I want to talk about this rather than The Dark Knight, because I want to give Heath Ledger his own episode anyway, so we'll end up talking about The Dark Knight for hours, I'm sure. Um, this idea is Batman is as large in life as his villains. And I think for me, beyond kind of the gritty nomenclature and the facade of the film, the idea of Batman being larger than life is something I don't think I'd ever seen explored about Batman. Batman is there. Obviously, you don't have, Gotham in the same way without Batman there. But in looking at things like The Killing Joke and Long Halloween in Year One, the idea of putting a Batman on an even playing field with his villains um, was something Batman Begins really wrestled with. Also, I like that they didn't choose what people think of as A tier villains. I think it's actually very fitting that this earlier iteration of Batman as an origin story has to deal with um, Carmine Falcone, has to deal with Ra's al Ghul, who is one of my favorite villains from Batman the Animated Series. And Cillian Murphy as Scarecrow is kind of amazing. Like, I love him in Peaky Blinders because I think Peaky Blinders is an amazing show for being what it is. I don't know if it's Cillian or Killian, by the way, and I apologize to all fans out there.
Mm.
His turn as
Uh,
the Scarecrow, even though he's not quote unquote an iconic Batman villain, I really think his turn as Scarecrow is kind of amazing because it's so insidious and behind the scenes, and it's like a revelation when Batman finds out a thing the audience has known. So this idea of how we grow mythology in Batman Begins is very exciting. And when you pull back the facade, you see so much in this movie, and you see so much of who Christopher Nolan is as a filmmaker. It's kind of wonderful, personally.
mm. You can kind of see why this film and its sequel and the third film as well,
Yeah.
why they kind of cemented Nolan as a leading filmmaker. Um, and I think some people look at The Dark Knight as his magnum opus, which I do kind of agree with. I remember being quite spellbound watching the film during oh God, I forget when actually it came out. I think it was 2008, 2010. We'll go back
2008. Yeah, 2008 was
2008.
The Dark Knight. Makes you really think about how long you've been alive, doesn't it? Ah!
Ah,
I
indeed.
have to take ibuprofen for my back before I go to bed, and I kind of hate that about my life. But what you gonna do?
Oh, but um, yes, I remember watching it. Remember being absolutely spellbound. Yeah, so you kind of really see it, and I mean, hats off to him. He did such a great job with crafting his own take on the Mythos. I mean, it could have gone really badly in
Yeah.
in the end of the day.
People
Like,
thought
it
it was
could,
going to. People were concerned about
yes.
a lot about Batman Begins, from the
Mm,
casting of then Tom Cruise's wife, Katie Holmes, because Tom Cruise was the
yeah.
War of the Worlds remake, so they came out, and so people were like worried people wouldn't go to see a Batman film because like people would feel like they'd have to choose. My
Mm,
choice is always Nicole Kidman in that case, but that's neither here nor there. So that was kind of the fact that there weren't quote unquote A tier villains in this, the fact that Katie Holmes was in it, the fact that it lives in Batman and Robin shadow. This could have easily flopped. The way that Revenge of the Sith kind of flopped, which I don't think is a bad Star Wars movie, but like people were kind of expecting Star Wars to succeed and Batman to fail, and it kind of flipped around. Again, the movie that
mm,
I saw in theater 3 times this summer was Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, because I really
mm,
like that candy coated acidic darkness. But
yes.
Batman Begins, from the poster to the music to the like doing it in like a real location in a very almost anti Tim Burton esque thing, like Batman Begins really succeeds, but you have to have the things leading up to Batman Begins to get Batman Begins. Like you can't just say, well, the
Yeah.
Showmaker films, if they'd never existed, we would have gotten this. I don't think anyone would have been ballsy enough to do this kind of gritty, dark, like Neo almost drag king Bale Bat that we got. This also put Christian Bale on the map. He was
Yeah.
not like a big star before this film. Like I think he'd done a few things, but Batman Begins really gave Christian Bale a place in Hollywood.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
and people make fun of the voice, but you know what? As far as an early iteration of Batman goes, I don't hate Bale Bat. I think the absurd voice works because later when
Mm.
we meet Bane and Tom Hardy's doing the absurd Bane voice, I think it kind of matches really nicely if you ask me. Like I'm kind of a
Hmm.
fan of like when they go for it and they do the absurdity, I think it's great personally.
I mean, even when they're taking it incredibly realistic, I mean, it there is still an element of
Yeah.
absurdity to any iteration of Batman when you think about it. And then if you start to take it seriously and look at the other DC films as well, they try to make it grounded so it feels as if this world works by these rules and such. But it doesn't take much for you to step back and start like questioning certain like things in not just Batman but any of the DC stuff.
Yeah.
Um, do you mind if I go off on a slight tangent
No,
at the
always,
second?
please. Yeah, because
Um,
I have a slight tangent of my own anyways, so whatever makes you happy.
just for literally a moment, because I don't think I'll ever be able to touch upon this again. So there really is a circumstance will allow me to do so. We mentioned about the Star Wars thing, Revenge of the Sith and such.
Yeah.
Um, hats off to Hayden Christian for actually coming up with a way to actually make me dislike Anakin quite quite a lot. It
If
was
if you dislike Hayden Christensen in that movie, wait until you
oh,
see Hayden Christensen in that rom-com he played, where he had
oh
like this dubious Italian accent.
oh no no I don't like Hay oh no no I don't dislike Hayden Christian. No, no, I meant like I take my hat off to him about how he actually managed to make Anakin a a dislikable character. I was wondering how they were going to do it, but Anakin's sheer stupidity and his choices in the film really sealed the deal for me. So I'm more like congratulating him on managing to really like I was like slightly foaming at the mouth during it because I wanted to take Anakin and just slap him and say, "What the hell are you doing?" And
Uh,
but
so bruised, so sad boy. I will
yeah.
say what's interesting for me is I have a different relationship with the prequels because I lived in Vegas at the time
Mm,
and I saw the prequels almost exclusively in IMAX. So at the size that I
mm.
saw the films, like maybe Batman and Robin would have worked if people had only seen it in IMAX or something. I don't know. But I forgive a lot for the prequels because one, I don't think they're that bad. Two,
Mm.
I saw them in IMAX, so I have like a thing where it's like, yeah, that's great. Um, but Batman Begins
Yeah.
blew it out of the water. By the way, would you like to guess? There's two actors that were in line to possibly play this version of Batman. I'm gonna be very amused because I have to tell you these two names because they're two of our biggest crushes. Well, one is mine, one is yours.
Oh, oh, Chris Evans?
No,
It's not Chris Evans. Henry Cavill?
Henry Cavill was. Is it Cav? Have I been saying it with the wrong I sound this
I
whole time?
I
Does he say
think
it Cavell? Like Carvel ice cream? Because I've been saying Henry Cavill the whole time, and now I
I
feel
think
like an a-hole.
I might have maybe I missaid it. I think there's maybe I've done the mispronunciation. Um, but okay, so he was lined up for this.
Yeah,
Interesting. Can't really imagine
I know,
Bat
right?
Cavill, but okay.
Yeah.
Go on.
David Boreanaz was also. I remember. I actually
Oh.
remember. I remember the long article about he had just kind of come off of Angel at that point, and his star was really high. And I remember reading about Batman Begins and hearing they're looking at David Boreanaz, and I thought to myself, no, he's Angel. He can't play Batman. He's already played a vampire. I remember being like ardently like, okay, I'm not mad about it, but also I don't think it's gonna work. Um, but like Ewan Bailey also kind of was in talks, Josh Hartnett, Billy Crudup, uh, Jake Gyllenhaal. there's a universe in which Jake Gyllenhaal apparently was gonna play Batman, and I cannot for the life of me envision, like, if people think they can't envision Michael Keaton as Batman, I can't envision Jake Gyllenhaal being Batman. I can't, like, it doesn't, like, my brain can't wrap around. So I'm just thinking, oh,
Oh.
Heath Ledger was also, before he was cast as the Joker, he was in the running to play Bruce, to play
Oh,
Batman. And I'm
that's
curious
interesting.
about, like, if he said he didn't want to, but he was intrigued by the idea of being the Joker, or like what it was. But yeah, so it's an interesting thing of, like, people were scared of this movie because they it lived in the shadow of other things, but there were some big names that, like, they intently cast big names, not for the
Mm,
time, but
yes.
like, something about Christian Bale, like, he had to put on a whole bunch of weight after The Machinist, which actually I think is probably my favorite Christian Bale movie. But like, Bale Batman is, people do that voice. Now, this is the other form of the iconography of the Bat thing, is where people do the voice, and when they do the Batman voice and they like scream Rachel, they always do the Bale Batman voice for screaming Rachel, and like,
Oh,
it's,
so not Martha.
no, yeah.
Sorry, go on.
No, I also think for iconography, this is the first Batman movie that ever scared me. I never felt like I was in danger in a Batman movie, but something about, after Ra's al Ghul
Mm,
does the poisoning of the water and the people start to become like the zombie mob, like, that was the first time in a Batman film I'd ever felt like Batman and his allies were indeed in danger. There's something
mm,
about that fear mob that really, like, unsettled me. This is the first time I think Batman, even in the comics, where I'd ever felt so unsettled. And I
mm,
think kudos to Cillian Murphy for being able to pull that off as Dr. Jonathan Crane, because that's a hard role to pull off, especially
mm,
when it didn't exist really anywhere except for Batman the Animated Series before,
mm.
except for the comics, obviously. But
Yes.
the A-list casting for this, the kind of the who is going to be Batman, who's going to portray it. Um, what do you think of this color scheme? What do you think of kind of this gold, orange, black color scheme that Batman Begins does, as opposed to like the black and yellow of the Michael Keaton Batman, the Joel Shoemaker, where it's kind of more of a blue, but not quite a blue gray. Like, what do you think of the Batman Begins, kind of the sunset, like, being created out of a whole bunch of bats Batman thing they got going on here?
Well, it's clearly color theory at work there. Because they're using different tones and hues of yellow and orange throughout the film to help set a particular mood. When you have blues against blacks and such, it tends to generate a bit more of a calming atmosphere, a bit more of a more of a somber tone, whereas yellows and such. Um, Sometimes if they're in the right tones, it can represent sunshine, brightness, etc., and that does come across, and as you say, with sunsets and such. But done in a kind of more drab, gritty way, it underlines the theme of fear that Scarecrow is bringing across, the unnerving aspect of it. Um, there's a reason why in DC, the Sinestro Corps of the Green Lantern mythos, they draw their power from the yellow light of fear. And fear is something that Batman has used himself to, put across his reputation within Gotham to make the criminal element afraid of him. But then at the same time, Batman himself is a big jumble of his own fears, doubts, and insecurities. And I think he only keeps it under control through his sheer willpower.
Yeah,
Um,
which is what makes Batman Who Laughs so intriguing, because the dark multiverse underneath the regular multiverse, all those Batmans are made out of his fears and nightmares that he's conquered as
mm,
Batman. Um,
Yes.
I will also say Batman Begins has the honor of being the only Batman film we've talked about thus far for summer shorts that is constantly on TV. Like as I
Mm,
scroll down the Google for it, it's on at least 5 channels um,
mm.
today through Saturday. So if you want to watch Batman Begins, this is going to be the one that you don't have to have the DVD for. It's just out there
Mm.
in the world, and you can pretty much find it wherever you want.
And I wonder whether that is partially DC and Warner Brothers doing that. They're, because this film sort of really kick-started um, their attempt at their DC new film universe. I would say that Batman Begins is sort of like film one in the new era that they were trying to do. It wasn't part of the extended universe. They kind of kept that the Dark Knight trilogy as a separate thing in itself. But it really was sort of like the point where they started off, and then Batman Begins led on naturally to the DC extended universe. Like you Superman, Wonder Woman, you see a lot of the more realistic interpretations of the characters coming across because of the fact that the Dark Knight trilogy did so well that had a massive impact on DC films that would follow afterwards.
Do you think Batman Begins, out of all of the live action Batman, because we don't want to count Batman the animated series, that's just not fair. Is this the most accessible for like someone that's like, I want to watch a movie about Batman? Do you think this is the most accessible one? Like this would be the easiest one to pop in to explain who Batman is to people?
Yes and no. Yes, because it is a straightforward origin film. It explains about how he came to be himself and how this interpretation of the character like grew. And I would say like the fact that the Dark Knight trilogy is a trilogy of uh, it's pretty well self-contained. It's easy to get into this film and then the sequel films. But then Batman as a character, I don't want to say there's a lot more to Batman and his stories and such than just what the Dark Knight trilogy is. Um, so I'd say this is a good point, maybe to start off for cinematic Batman. I would very much encourage people to watch, say, at the very least, the original 90s animated Batman cartoon, which is still like such a classic DC animated cartoon and really helps cover more of his extensive lore and such.
I think one thing I would have loved to have seen after Nolan had done Dark Knight Rises, or instead of Dark Knight Rises, I would love to apply this Batman Begins formula specifically to because they had talked about doing this forever, a Batman Beyond film. And I liked the Batman Beyond TV series, and I liked Terry McGinnis. I would be really
Yes.
intrigued to see what Nolan would do with the kind of like Blade Runner dystopia Gotham and doing this kind of Batman Begins, but with Terry and then a much older Bruce. Or doing an Asriel plot line would be really interesting. Uh,
Mm,
there's something really just. I also love one of the kind of biggest names in film history is in the film as a side character. Morgan Freeman as Lucius Fox is amazing, not just because there's a universe in which his son takes up the Batman mantle, but I really do think Morgan Freeman and Michael Caine as Lucius Fox and Alfred Pennyworth, that kind of support system that Batman gets in this film specifically is
mm,
maybe the best portrayal of kind of the butler dad figure. For me, I really think it works fairly well because they bring Michael Caine brings his like Muppets heft into this universe where he's like playing a very serious role in this rather even this version of Gotham is insane, honestly. Um, and I really like the heft they both bring to their roles and how they guide Bruce, which is why when when Bruce and Lucius do the thing in the later movie with the sonar technology. I just it's an amazing trilogy on its own, and I'm
Mm.
very appreciative for it. Um,
Mhm.
yeah. Also, shout out to Rutger Hauer. He's in this movie too. He has a cameo as William Morrow. Well, the
Mm.
small role. I guess it's bigger than a cameo, but he's not really a main character.
So, you know how I was just talking about influence and legacy of this film on later productions and such?
Yes,
Just to quickly touch upon a fact that we spoke of right at the beginning of this episode, you mentioned about Fantastic Four 2005 came out in the same summer as this film.
it did. If
Mhm.
you can believe it,
And
that's a year. That's a year to remember, right?
oh, yes. I feel that so Fantastic the sequel to this, Silver Surfer, sadly, it didn't do well. When I saw Silver Surfer, I did feel it was a bit aimless in what story it was trying to tell. Um,
Yeah, yeah, I can agree with that. Yeah.
but what my point is that afterwards, 20th Century Fox went away in order to keep the rights to the characters. They had to make a new film and get it out by say 2015, which they did. Hmm. I wonder where they took the inspiration to do a quote unquote more realistic, grim, gritty version of the Fantastic Four as tortured superhumans came from. I mean, I'm not saying Batman had any powers and such, but I just find it quite interesting to see how a certain legacy sort of, I believe, influenced how they took the new portrayal of Fantastic Four when they released the 2015 movie.
Yeah, and that was an awful movie. I'll just be honest. It was the casting was fine. We can talk about that if we ever do a Fantastic Four episode because I actually think their TV animated series is probably one of the best examples of
Mhm.
Hanna-Barbera both succeeding and failing. Um,
Mm.
yeah, but it's an interesting thing because we're going to be winding down the episode here. We know
Yes.
this is why I want to give Heath Ledger his own episode so we have time to talk about the Dark Knight in a bigger context. Because I think it really is about the prestige of when you showcase actors well and can still do a blockbuster well. And I think we saw that with the Barbie movie as well in a lot of ways. Um,
Mm.
I love this because when you look beyond the grit, it's not just super macho bad daddy. Like I sometimes feel about Frank Miller's Batman, where he started giving him like guns and weaponry of that nature, which was something he had been real opposed to before. Um, it's not just the grit, it's actually how you build an origin story and mythology. And we kept trying to see people doing this after Batman Begins over and over again. But for like a mythology tale that's not Christopher Reeve's Superman, this is an exquisite origin tale beginning of the mythology. This is how you adapt something and take little things that you can change without changing the story, like the idea of Batman being afraid of bats, going to see a bat opera instead of a film, and it still works. And it works. It enhances the story, and that's where I think Nolan really succeeded. Um, it's not perfect, but it's a very good Batman film. It really just
Mm.
if the realism style bothers you, then this may not be the Batman for you, but you are missing some very good, important stuff that resonated out through the superhero community. What's interesting is I avoided Iron Man specifically because of this Batman film, because Iron Man and Batman had been linked together in a Marvel DC crossover series as like
Mm.
sympathetic souls to each other, saving the universe. So I had avoided Iron Man with Robert Downey Jr. because I wasn't interested in it, but also because of Batman Begins, and I was like, I don't want to see Batman Begins again. I've got Batman Begins. Why do I have to see that?
Mhm.
Um, so that's my story
And
of why I still haven't seen Iron Man. Just also because I have no interest in Iron Man.
oh, wow. So you haven't still haven't seen it to this day, actually?
I just don't like Iron Man enough. Like I don't want to sit through. I
Okay.
know they redeem him, but I just don't care. I gotta be honest about it. Just not for me, and that's okay.
But isn't Gwyneth Paltrow enough to bring you in?
I mean, I'd prefer her as Holly Holiday on Glee as substitute teacher that doesn't care about anything but herself. But that's neither here nor there. I am
Yes.
gonna get you to watch Glee at some point. By the way, I'm gonna
Oh.
make it happen. I'm gonna do what I have to do. Um, but
Oh.
yeah, but so again, not the best Nolan film in my mind. Probably not the most um, conceptual either, which I would give probably to Tenet and Memento. But as far as both what we expect from a Nolan film and this being about smack dab in the middle of his ascendance, Batman Begins is it was worth. Summer Shorts wouldn't have been Batman Summer Shorts without talking about Batman Begins.
Mm.
Yeah,
I I agree. And yes, I'm not a fan of how gritty the DC movies came in later years. However, this realistic take on Batman was superbly done.
yeah.
And if you want to see a Batman film, this certainly ranks up among the top tier for that.
I
Um,
will say I love the Batmobile so much. I hate the Bat Tumbler. Like the one thing I would change about this movie, if I could change anything, is the tumbler. I just hate. I know it's supposed to be clunky, but I hate it so much. It's so clunky. It's not aesthetically pleasing. Like I'm not angry about it, but like I just it's not. This is like the anti-toyetic movie where Batman and Robin is everything to toy. This is like nothing in this can become a toy, kind of thing. But I kind of like that. So,
yes.
all right.
Oh,
So that was
well
great. I
then.
feel like I have to watch. I feel like I have to watch Batman Begins now sometime this weekend, and I can watch it on pretty much any HBO channel anytime I want. Because that's one of the places it's appearing. But yeah. So this has been Summer Shorts. What a fun time! What a fun time! Just start and get a taste. What's your favorite Batman film that we have not talked about? What Batman film you're like? Where is my Summer Short episode for this? Let us know, and we will get back to you next Bat time, next Bat channel here on Everything is Gay, even the straight stuff. Good evening.
Bye-bye. Bye.